Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Built for This. I'm really looking forward to today's interview. I have Glenn Poulos with me, and he is an entrepreneur and strategist building his third company, Prog USA, which supplies tools and equipments that help test and strengthen the modern power grid. His work supports utilities, contractors, and the growing demand tied to data centers and AI power needs. Glenn started his first company at 29 and grew it for 15 years before a strong exit. He later co-founded Gap Wireless and helped it grow it past 80 million in sales before another 8-figure exit. After 2 wins in tech and distribution, he moved from Toronto to Orlando to lead Prog USA and step into a new industry, new customers, new products, and a new country. He believes growth comes from changing lanes when others stay put. Glenn is a seasoned sales strategist and an award-winning author of Never Sit in the Lobby. He also runs 2 AI training projects and performs as a voiceover actor and charity DJ under the name Fossil, helping nonprofits host successful events. So welcome, Glenn. It's so great to have you.
Thanks, Carly. Great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure. And then if anyone gets excited about the book, we're of course we'll probably talk about it, and I'm gonna put it in the
Sounds
show
good.
notes. From the avid reader, that would probably be the first thing that popped in my head. It's like, what book?
Yeah.
Uh, so let's actually talk about this. You've been through many exits, and you've had
Yep.
good exits and bad exits. So
Yeah.
what was one of the things when you had a bad exit? Tell us a little bit about that and some lessons that we could learn.
Yeah. So at the beginning, the exit was wonderful. It was well into the 8-figure exit. There were 3 of us, 3 partners, and we all became multimillionaires overnight. And it was wonderful. But it was a stock deal with a public company in Canada. And so we got very little cash, but we got a ton of their shares. And so many shares that we became insiders in the public company, and we were on there's a restriction with the I can't remember the Canadian Stock Exchange governing body, but that says you can only sell 1% of your shares every 90 days for the first 2 years, right? And so we couldn't sell the shares, and so having sold the business, and we went to work for the division that we had sold them in under the public umbrella. By the time and before we could sell really any of the shares, that company that bought us with their shares went belly up, and the shares went to zero. And so I was working for them. The CFO from the public entity came and said, "Hey, we're insolvent. You have to fire everyone." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And it was like, "Today you got to fire them like in an hour," right? And so I literally, went from thinking I was set for life to being broke, right? And I was mid 40s, and obviously I wasn't set because all my money was tied up in the shares that were now worth nothing, and so I had to start over, and that was why I started the second company. And so the lesson was, don't sell for all shares. Make sure you get cash. And
Yeah.
if I could say
It's
it that way.
wild. It's actually wild that you're sharing that. So the same thing happened to my dad. Same
Oh,
thing.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, him and his partner
Yeah.
exited his company, and they were in the US, and they had to hold on to the stocks for a year before selling. And
Yeah.
then that company also went bankrupt.
So
Yeah.
basically, your dad and I gave away our businesses.
Yes, it was actually pretty heartbreaking for them. It was really very challenging because they had worked
Yeah.
really hard to build everything up,
Yeah, and
right?
I can feel for your dad, of course. And I had other 2 partners, and they were devastated as well, but so was I. But fortunately, I had the benefit of 2 things: one, a very bad memory, and 2, um, much more than the resentment and the being upset over it, was my fear of being poor. And I just basically had to get moving. And
Yeah.
my the other guys, they kind of waited, and and they were kind of like getting over it or whatever. But within a week, I was already starting the other business, and that business grew to $80 million over the next 15 years, right? Not saying that was all the magic of it all or why, but just to say, like, I just had to get moving in the right direction, because I wasn't sure how I would ever get a proper job and what I would do. And so to me, it was just more logical just to start another company.
Yeah.
And I'd learned a bunch of lessons about treating the customers well at my old business. We had faltered, we no longer were a pleasure to do business with. I found at the end, and I wanted to change that with the new company. And so that became, the breeding grounds for a new way of building a customer experience as well. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I'm curious too, with the exit, like this was a good exit when you exited the pardon me, I forgot the name. It's wireless, Gap Wireless.
And
Yeah,
Gap Wireless, yeah.
Gap Wireless. So yeah, when you exited Gap Wireless, that was a solid exit. So tell us a little bit
All
about that.
cash. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It
We
was
want to
all
hear the
cash.
signs of the solid
Yeah.
exit. Yeah.
So, but when it's all cash, it's often, like it's often private equity. And then there's other caveats that you don't learn till later on. And so it can still be a good exit or whatever, but there's lessons to be learned, right? So one of them is that when private equity when private equity buys your company, they often want you to roll back in a significant amount of the money in shares in their business. So in a way, it's the same thing, right? Like they'll give you, let's say it was $1 million, right? Like say they're buying your business for $1 million. They're going to say, okay, I'll give you $1 million, but we'd like you to roll 300 grand back into the bigger company that's buying you. And you will get 300 grand worth of shares in the company that owns your company and these other three companies that we've bought. And, you kind of become a minority shareholder, and then you get another bite at the apple, Glenn, right? You get another, a second bite, right? A second taste. And they have all these weird private equity buzzwords the way they say it, right? And it's like, and that one's probably going to be 4 or 5 times as big, right? And I mean, it was still a big sum of money I got to keep. And so I did do the roll in, but I'm still now that was 22. We're now into 2026. I have no idea when they're going to sell the company, right? The shares are not liquid, right? So I do own, some small percentage of this bigger company, which hopefully will sell for more than they paid for it or what have you. But it's a one-time event, right? And
Mhm.
and I sold kind of at the peak, so I got top dollar. I kind of rolled in my top dollar, and then the market in telecom tanked, and so we've been clawing our way out of the fire for several years in telecom, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't know when they'll be able to sell it. So that money's kind of stuck too, right? And the other thing is when you go to work for private equity, the other part is you want to time limit how long you work for them, because
Mhm.
I guarantee you the way private equity runs a company is different than the way you ran it as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah,
so
that's
there's
true.
going to be a window of 18 to 24 months where you guys will probably, your family business, whatever you're running in the past, is going to, come to odds with the way the private equity wants to run the company, right? So put a hard timeline on it that you got to go on the 18th, 24th, so there's a fixed window. It could even be 12 months or 6 months, just depends, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I was talking to a CEO recently, a founder of a company that got bought out, and she's 3 years in. She signed
mhm.
like 5 years that she would stay on, and she's having a hard time because the whole
Yeah,
dynamic has shifted from getting to kind of do things, strategize in her own unique way
yeah,
to now we're under this bigger umbrella and this is how things are done. Yeah, it can
right.
be really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. And what's funny is like the things that, I left at the 3 year on the button mark, right? And it was like, and I didn't have a timeline. There was no timer, but that just was when it happened. But it was like night and day. And there was just no question. It was like the time wasn't now, and now it's the time, right? And it was like one
Yeah.
day, and it was like all of a sudden the things changed. They brought in new staff, new leadership. They're moving me around. But the funniest thing is like that you struggle with is like they change the color of your logo and stuff, right? And
Yeah.
uh and that's the stuff that really bugs you. It can be challenging to deal with, like the branding piece. Like, I'm not a branding expert, but I'm like a branding snob, if I can say it that way, right?
Yep.
Like, and it's not like I know that it should be blue and green or it should be orange and yellow or whatever. Like I don't know anything of anything, but I do know that I don't want that and I do want that. And being the being the head of the company, I always got to pick what I wanted, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, 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 we're going in a different direction, and yeah, and so there was all sorts of incidents like that kind of grind your gears, right? And
Yeah.
small stuff, right?
It's actually huge to change branding. I think that's a massive shift with a company
Yeah.
that's that large. That's a huge shift. It's an interesting choice. Sometimes I wonder like what makes them make these choices on the back end, like just listening in on it. But I remember when Gap changed their logo. Do you remember this?
The
Gap,
Gap, the clothing company.
yeah, they
Well,
actually
yeah, because
changed
remember
their
my name and my
logo.
yeah, yes,
Yeah,
I do remember it.
and
Yeah,
it crashed and like all
yeah,
the everything like dropped. It was like 40% stock market crash for Gap or something. Like it was
right.
insane and it was from the logo change. And you're like, maybe you don't always need
Did
to
I tell did I
rebrand.
tell you the story on our other call about my legal battle with the Gap because of my
No, but
name?
I thought about that. So I'm curious. Yeah, did they
So
connect with you?
there's a funny preamble to it. The funniest preamble is that when I came up with Gap Wireless was basically around the same time that they came up with. So it was Gap Wireless Incorporated, and they came up with the Gap Wireless bra.
Oh, no way.
Can you believe it? Like, how in the
That's
world could a
incredible.
clothing brand ever get mixed up with Gap Wireless? And they came out, it was literally called the
This
Gap
is a
Wireless
Gap
bra.
wireless bra. Yeah.
So, anyways, I had applied for the trademark, and we almost had it. And then a few days before the time, whatever this waiting period or whatever was expiring, they launched a massive campaign to
Yeah.
not only not give us the trademark, but to change our name, to force us to change the name. But Gap is my initials, right? And so the guy, the consultant about trademarks that I asked about it, he said, dude, because this is about your name and you don't sell clothes, like we're just going to say this, and this, and I guarantee you're going to get the trademark. And he
Yeah.
just knew it. It doesn't really matter. That's not the punchline, right? The punchline is that we ended up going to this tribunal, which was like a court case, in downtown Toronto, 40th floor at, Yonge and Bay or whatever, like this fancy, fancy building or whatever. And they had like 20 lawyers on one side of the thing, and it was me and this guy, right? And they start drilling me, and it's like, oh, so it's Gap is, how'd you come up with the name? Right. And I'm like, oh, that's my initials, right? And they're like, oh, it's your initials. They're like, well, what's your middle name? And I'm like, James. And they're like, oh, James. And they're like, well, why is it Gap Wireless then? And it's and so I was already prepared for this, right? And I'm like, well, my wife's name is Alyssa, and Jip Wireless just doesn't
Yeah.
sound that good in my
Jujip.
branding.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Jip Wireless just
Yeah.
doesn't sound good, right? And when I had said that about my wife being, her name was Alyssa or whatever, like their faces, the color ran out of their faces, right?
They're like, we're
And
screwed. Yeah.
yeah, and I had to sign this agreement that I would never sell clothing, and also, things like that. And they had like 20 or 30 other cases on the go with companies that were passing off the Gap name. So I understand their perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and a company, the Gap, in Canada, in Vancouver, there was an adventure thing called Gap Adventures or something, and very famous brand in Vancouver, up the mountains and all the, and they got forced to change their name because they were caught with passing off. They were selling clothing that was like the Gap, and it was determined to be, on the shady side of whatever, and they made them change their name completely. And
Mm.
we got the trademark, we got to keep her name. Yeah. So it was a funny
That's
story.
amazing. Yeah, funny story. And I was wondering how you actually kept it. So that makes sense. That actually makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. And it was a cool story.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too. So, you mentioned that you exited at the right time. Were there any indicators that actually kind of showed you that you were exiting at a high?
So for anyone that, running a company, wanting to start a company, or thinking about selling a company at any point, it's very simple that for the most part, 99% of the time, they're going to take your last 3 years and they're going to average it and then come up with your, let's say your EBITDA, your profit. There's different multiples, but it's, at the end of the day, it's the profit, right? They take 3 years profits or 3 years EBITDA, they add it up, divide it by three, and multiply it times a multiplier based on what bracket you're in, right? So if you're a $500,000 to 2 million. I'm not an expert at this, right? EBITDA, maybe your multiple's 2.5, right? And if you're 2 million to 5 million, maybe you're getting 3.5 to 4.5 or whatever. And then it just goes up and up, right? And then above 10 million of profit, I mean, the multiples are much higher, right? And so the right time is when you don't have a shitty year in the middle of your multiple, right? And so in 2019, we had a very harsh and lessons, which I might have told you about before. I can't remember, but 2020, 2021, and 2022 were the result of the changes we made in 2019.
Mhm.
If I had have done it in 2021, it would have dragged us down
Mhm.
the poorly performing year. And so I had to get 3 good years in, and it was pure dumb luck that when that 3 years was February 2022, which was literally the moment of the peak. It was like it literally went downhill from the day after we sold it. It started going downhill.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is wild.
For sure. Like
Yeah.
6 months later, I don't even know if would have gotten a deal on the company to buy it. They probably wouldn't even have bought it.
Oh, no way. That's
Yeah.
wild. Okay. So
Yeah.
the thing to look for is the 3 years. That 3 years
Yeah.
of like a solid business if you're
Yeah.
thinking
And
about
so you
selling it,
gotta
it's a good
you gotta
time to
figure out
look.
what's my number
Mhm.
and divide it by 3 and then figure out, okay, well, when am I going to be in that profit bracket? You got to do the math.
Um,
It's a couple of steps, right? It's because you got to know what your multiple will be, and then you got to know what your number is and take your number, divide it by your multiple that you'll be in, and
yep.
then that's what the average of your 3 years got to be. So, you know, and yeah, and that's how you figure out when you get to sell, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll buy it based on a lesser numbers, but only in a crazy market or to get some kind of you know some of these things like social media, like if you're buying like WhatsApps or things like that before revenues and all that, like that's different. They're buying
Yeah.
subscriptions and they're buying strategic few, but I'm just a company with brick and mortar and a standard business sells by
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great advice. And I'm curious too, because with Gap Wireless, like what had you decide to build Gap Wireless?
So it was easier than getting a job after I went bankrupt. I didn't go bankrupt, but the company went bankrupt, right? And I lost my job in the early 2000s, so I had to start Gap Wireless. Um, the name I came up with in like less than 3 minutes, right? It was like I got to start a company. Oh, okay. What are my initials? GP. Okay, G. Buy a vowel A, and because when I actually started the company, I wasn't married, right? But when I it was just a coincidence that my wife's name had an A in it.
I feel like
But
that worked out really well, babe.
when
Really
I
well.
started the company, we weren't even together, right? And so I had to buy a vowel to get Gap, and hopefully the Gap clothing's not listening to this podcast, right? Just kidding.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum.
But, and so I just thought, and so you were asking me like why or how or like
Yeah.
I needed something to do, and what I was doing was working pretty well. Like we had really good relationships in this growing we were in the cell phone infrastructure business, meaning we help build the wireless network, not the phones, but the
Mhm.
phone network, right? And so
Ooh.
that was just growing like crazy. And 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, it's always it in and in the early 2000s it was growing uh in gangbuster. So it wasn't like I wanted to exit that technology space. And so
Mhm.
I was able to go beg to the vendors that we didn't pay in my old business and go to the customers that we didn't ship to in my old business. The customers were mad at me because we didn't ship. The vendors were mad because we didn't pay. And and as like I've said before, one of the three things you need in order to start a company is a customer that you don't deserve.
Yeah.
So the first thing, because they have to take a chance on you, right? When you're starting a new company, doesn't matter, if you're Albert Einstein and you solve relativity, doesn't mean that your mousetrap company is any good, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to, when a company's new, the first order, someone's taking chance on you, right? And
Mhm.
so, one of the biggest companies in Canada took a chance on the new business and said, okay, we'll trust you. We'll give you this amount of business, even though we're mad at you because of that and whatever. And they ended up becoming our biggest customer, and
Mhm.
is still the biggest customer of the company that bought my company, and it's still their biggest customer. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And
really
so
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
I love how you said that. It's like you're basically getting a customer you don't deserve. Like you start a business
yeah,
that's a customer you don't deserve because you're not in
yeah,
the industry yet, you haven't done it, but they're basically giving you a
yeah.
chance.
Do you
How
want to
did
know what the
you
other two things are to
Oh,
start a
I
business?
do. I do. I do.
Okay, so the third thing is you need a customer that you didn't earn, right? You have to earn all the
Yep.
rest of them, right? The first one is pure luck, right? And so the first thing that you need, hear me now and believe me later, is that you need 18 to 24 months of runway in your bank to
I
support
agree.
yourself,
Yep.
whether it's your spouse or whether if you're single, it's got to be your money, obviously. And whether it's ramen noodles or filet mignon, you got to be able to pay for that for 18 to 24 months without taking anything out of the business. Yes, it might be 12 or 9 or whatever, but usually it's not. And you
Mhm.
have to know that you can't be you don't need to be a burden on the business in the first year and a half or so.
Mhm.
Um, so you need a nice, loving spouse, or you need some money in the bank, or friends, family, whatever. Right? You need that runway, and then the second thing that you need is what I call the minimum viable product. Not the
Mhm.
perfect mousetrap, but just a mousetrap that works well, because you can
Mhm.
perfect it over time. If you So many people want to, just a little more tweak and this another line of code and you know another revision, and they never have a product, right? And they never get it out there. You got to get it out there. You got to find a customer that'll have
Yeah.
faith in you that you don't deserve, and deliver them your best product at that moment, and then obviously you improve on it, right? And those are
Yeah.
the three things, right? And then you take the leap, um you know and that's how you become an entrepreneur, in
Yeah.
my
I think
opinion.
even the cash flow dynamic is a really important one. I feel like it's not
Yeah,
shared very often. People
yeah,
start talk about startups and starting your own business, and it's really sensationalized, but that is what it really looks
yeah,
like. It takes a couple
yeah,
years for it to get moving and grooving enough that you're
yeah,
funding the business, you're funding
yeah,
yourself, maybe your family, and then you're like, okay, now we can scale. Working my ass off
right,
for 2 years, now we're gonna scale, and I gotta work my
yeah,
ass off again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the thing I learned on this third time now that I'm is that you don't always have to start from scratch, right? It never occurred to me, back
Yeah,
before, because one, I'd lost everything and I had to start a new company, but it was easier for me to buy a company in Florida than it was for me to start a new one, right? And
yeah,
there's so many things you need, and nowadays everything is such a pain, right? Setting up bank accounts with all the forms and everything, and it's just so much paperwork, right, for insurance and banking, and you know getting leases and things like that. If you buy a business, you get the customers that gave a chance 10 years ago or 5 years ago, however old the business is. So I bought a 20-year-old company, right? So I'm just joined the business and I'm celebrating my 20th anniversary, right? And because a few months after I joined, they became 20 years old, right? And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this is perfect. The first thing I had to do is change the logo, and the second thing is come up with the 20th anniversary logo, right?
yeah.
And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. And so yeah, and so most people, maybe they think of it, but a lot of people don't think of it about, there's many, many people who they
Mhm.
don't have kids to give the business to or sell it to. They don't have friends, family, whatever. There's nowhere for the business to go.
Yeah,
And, they might try to sell it, but, they struggle or what have you. And there's millions of businesses out there you can buy that already have a proven cash flow, meaning they're cash flow positive. They're not a
mhm,
losing, and you can come in and apply your magic and grow it, right? But you already have a bank, you already have insurance, already have customers, already have employees and systems and processes, and all that's done, and you can just come in and improve it, and that's a huge time savings, right? And
yeah.
and I'm really seeing the benefit of it now, because that's sort of what I'm living right now. So,
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And it is true. There are a significant quantity of businesses out there that people sell and people want to sell.
yeah,
And yeah, there's some,
yeah,
it's funny, there was one, my uncle invested in it. And it was interesting though. He kind of got it on fire sale. And
right,
the challenge with them is they hadn't kind of done what you did. It's like we got to have those 3 solid years or
right,
make sure that it sounds like your business on the back end was really stabilized, very
right,
organized. This one was not. And so even though it was producing pretty well and it was already established in the industry, it just they couldn't sell it for a lot because it was everything was
right.
like
It was a
handwritten
mess.
notes and paper. It's
Yeah,
like it's like this is what people are going to pay based off this
yeah,
dynamic. So I
right.
think even that is like make sure everything's really
Yeah,
grounded, organized, done well on the back end because that also impacts the pricing.
it does. It does.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's why where brokers come in, just like when you sell your house, I mean, you can sell it owner listing or whatever, but no realtors will bring anyone to see it. And, you have to take care of all the legal problems, anything that might come up yourself. It's always better. You know, to hire a realtor, in my opinion. And some
Hmm.
people might argue that, but they often get you more money anyways that covers their fee, right? And
Yeah.
they definitely mitigate the problems. And so a broker is very important when you're buying a business. And
Yeah.
and they'll help you with the due diligence so that they'll find the problems under the covers, right? And the another little tidbit I've learned selling the businesses, buying the business or whatever is this thing called quality of earnings.
Hmm.
And I learned it mainly when I sold Gap Wireless because they had a very complicated, very big company who bought us, and they had an elaborate QOE or QFE or whatever they call it, quality of earnings methodology. And what it means is they come in and they say, okay, like they just randomly pick like 5 big orders from a moment over the 3-year period, right? You don't know which one it's going to be. And they say this order, this order, this order, this order. You got to show the entire genesis of the order from the cradle to grave, right?
Hmm.
Like why did how'd you get that order? Where's the quote for the order to the customer? Where's the incoming email from the customer that asked you to buy this, right?
Hmm.
And then where's the quote? Okay, well, when you did the quote, how did you get the pricing? How'd you come up with the pricing? Okay, where's the price from your vendor, of whatever you're selling or whatever, or your price model that you came up with the price? And then where's the customer's PO? I want to literally see the PO
Yep.
from the customer. Then I want to see your POs to the vendor. Then I want to see their invoices to you. I want to see you showing me that you paid it. And what they do is they go end to end and they prove that that revenue is real
Yep.
because that's how people cook the books, right?
Yeah. It's funny you're saying that. So like about 20 years ago, there was a company I was working at and I was the operations manager and they were trying to go through a sale. I have never in my whole entire life created so many Excel sheets. It was
Yeah.
just day
Right.
after day of all this information, but it
Yeah.
was this dynamic of all these questions that they weren't prepared for. And so nobody wound up buying because you catch all
Right.
the little
Yeah.
bits and pieces and it was too much of a mom and pop kind of
Yeah.
startup. And so it
Yeah.
didn't sell. They didn't do the due diligence on the back
Yeah.
end. So we
Right.
got caught up in all that paperwork. You're
Right.
absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the opposite of that as well, just again for your listeners, just a little tidbit is that you also want to be careful not to do the opposite, which is like over curate your business in the sense that if you're selling it and maybe you think like, hey, we're going from, this many million in sales to this many, we need to upgrade our systems, right? And you think, okay, well, for the new owner's going to want to love this new
Hmm.
system. Or it's no different than putting a roof on your house and selling your house. The new owner is not going to pay for that roof, right? They
Yep.
want the house and a free roof, right? And so you lose in 2 ways. One, you put in all the time and effort and money and you spend it on, like, say, a new software system and all the grief that goes with that. And then you probably won't get the money out of the sale. And
Hmm.
two, it actually doesn't raise the value of your business. It actually lowers it because the new owners probably have their own system that they're
Hmm.
going to put in. And they're going to look at your
It's
business and say,
true.
when we put our system in place, we can get 10% more profit out of it. And
Yeah.
so you're kind of losing money. Like they got to write it off, the software, the expense that you went to. So that's a negative, and they devalue it. Whereas you might get a higher multiple for your business because it needs a new thing, and you should let them
Mm.
buy it.
Yeah, that's a great point because you're right. If they have to implement their system, take out an old one, then that's really time intensive.
Yeah,
Very time
especially if it's
intensive.
brand new and you just paid for it, right? And
Yep.
you haven't depreciated all those costs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's a
so
great point.
and they're a bigger company, right? So if they improve your
Mhm.
thing by 10% and their multiple's 10x and yours was only 3x, and they improve let's say $1 million more profit because of the system, times 10 is $10 million upgrade. Whereas with you, you kind of like took it away from them, right?
Yeah.
And right. And so these things don't make, they don't make a lot of sense to everyday person, but to these private equity guys and these guys that buy businesses and roll them up, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Well, I say to you, I feel like it's really important if you want to sell your business to study what they're looking for. Really
yeah,
study what they're looking
absolutely.
for, find out like the details, and you just build a company that genuinely makes them happy. And then you
Yeah,
have a really high probability of getting the best. Yeah, best bang
yeah.
for your buck there. Yeah. Yeah. And you said something that was interesting too. You mentioned like when you transitioned into Gap Wireless, because I am curious about this. When you transitioned into Gap Wireless, you had all these customers who hadn't been paid, vendors who had, or customers who weren't like fulfilled, vendors who haven't been paid. But then you actually went to them and you were able to create deals to start Gap Wireless. How'd you repair those relationships? Because
Yeah.
they were probably
So,
kind of annoyed with you. And I was like, well,
yeah.
that's cool. Yeah.
So the truth of it
Mhm.
is that on the customer side, most of the big ones did not come. And so, in Canada, there's three big phone companies. I won't specifically name them. I don't really think it matters, but I mean, two of the big three, um, did not come with us right away because they were too mad, right?
Yeah.
The other one, we just had such a good relationship with them that they decided to, and they realized they knew what happened.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't me per se, right, that did it. And so they took a chance. So I just begged all three of them to come with me, and one of them said yes. And that was actually all that I needed. We won back the other ones over time. But on the vendor side, it was different, right? I had to promise to pay them all back the money that they lost in order to sell to me. And so I said, "Hey, you got taken for whatever amount of money it was. Each one of them was a different amount of money, obviously, and there was goods, that either did or didn't ship or whatever. And I said, whatever that amount is over a set period of time, I will pay that back in my new company, even though I don't owe you the money. Right. It
Mm,
wasn't, I only own shares in that business. I worked there. It wasn't my debt. I didn't owe you, but I'll pay you
yeah.
back. Right. And I don't know how many vendors it was. It was like more than five and it was less than 10. And, um, and they all said, like sort of yes in a way, but only one of the 10 ish wanted the money and took it. And it was about
Yeah.
70 grand and we paid them the
Okay.
money. And
Okay.
and it was the least valuable one of them all. And it's
That's
funny,
interesting.
but it was a smaller company and it was probably a bigger hit to them, right? So they left clean, and over the years we made the money back. It didn't matter. But the bigger companies obviously did not, their difference between right and wrong or whatever kicked in, and they never made us pay for anything. So
Yeah.
and
Oh, that's
but
interesting. Yeah.
but
No, that's actually
promising to
really
pay them
cool.
back and get their money back was what was the approach that I took, right?
Yeah. And it got their attention. Yeah.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the business that you have in Florida right now. So, when you were
Sure.
evaluating what business to purchase, how did you do that? Like, what were you looking for? What made you decide that you wanted Prague, USA?
So one, it had to be in Florida because well, one, it had to be in the United States because everything's bigger in the US than Canada, right? So it's 10 times bigger at a minimum. And so for every deal that you do, it has the capacity to be 10 times bigger than the same deal in Canada, right? And it's just because of the scale of the population and the market, right? And so there's only 24 hours in a day. And so I figured if I can do a deal for 1 million, I'd rather do it for 10 million, right? Kind of thing. Right. And so I said, one, it has to be in the US. So in order to do that, I had to get an E2 visa, right? Which is a investor visa. It's not an immigration visa. It lets you live here in 5-year chunks. You can renew it, but you basically invest in a business. You don't, it's not a, it's a lot of money, but I mean, it's not a huge amount. I think you can get it for a little as like maybe 40 or 50K, but upwards of 150 is
Mhm.
like, I think a more notional amount of money as a down payment, or you put into the American economy by buying or putting a down payment on the business, you get an E2 visa, you're good for 5 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so US, fine, I get the visa that, by buying a business, that's how I was going to get it. Third, it had to be warm because I hate the cold. Right. And I mean, it's snowmageddon in Toronto, the last few days. All
It's
my
been
family
pretty
hates me
bad.
because I'm in
Yeah.
Orlando and they're in Toronto and
Oh.
they're freezing and it's cold today in Orlando, but I mean, it's not snowing. Right. So,
Yeah, and
and
it's nothing like Canada cold. Yep.
yeah, no, yeah, and then by February it'll be 30 or it'll be like in the 80s every day, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I still use Celsius, but and so um, the other thing is that the businesses that I did in Canada, they were always the exact same kind of business. The only thing that was different was really the product and maybe the customer. So
Mhm.
it's a business where I would approach companies around the world that make products, typically high tech electronic products, and I would sell them in the market of my choosing, either Canada. I mean, and Gap Wireless was a North American company, but most of our business was in Canada, and so we would approach companies in Italy and Sweden and Spain and Australia, and we'd find, oh, this is an amazing product, like antennas for cell sites, and we would sign a deal to be their distributor in Canada, right? And they don't have a sales force. They couldn't afford to open an office. And most companies, like, the Canadian companies wouldn't buy from them because they didn't want to deal with a company in Australia, right?
Mhm.
So we would become the importer, the service company, and our job was to, buy products internationally, import them to Canada, and technically support them in the market, right? And
Mhm.
so, and that's a business model. And so that's what my first company was in 1991, and that's what Gap Wireless was in 2007 to 2022. And so I was looking for a company that was a distributor, but I wanted it to be an electronics and instrumentation kind of stuff that I sold, but it had to be in a not in telecom, because I had a lot of competitive like landscape to the deal, because it was a big deal when they bought the business. So I had to stay on side of the no competes and all that.
Mhm.
And so I decided to buy a business that did the exact same thing, but with different customers, products, and territory. So I changed countries. I changed from telecom to the power utility space, and I changed, from Toronto to Florida, right? And
Yeah.
so different products selling to different customers in a different territory, right? And
Yeah.
but everything else is the same about the business. We have distribution contracts from around the world, where we have a service center here, a training center here, and we train the customers, we service the products, we demo the products for these international, and it's mainly European, and one, company from South Africa, one from Australia, etc. And so I look for distributors, and I found one. And there's a lot of websites, bizbuysell.com and things like that, where you can, but the best thing is to form a relationship with brokers, and one broker tells the other broker who tells another one, and I mean, you end up getting on lists, and they bring you they bring you companies, right? Once you're
Yeah.
become a in the market kind of thing, right? Like Glenn's one of the guys in Orlando that wants to buy businesses that are wholesale distributors, right? And so they
Yeah.
send you deals, right? And so, but the best way to buy a business is, and so I kind of lucked out and I found it and I bought it. But to be more fair to the audience, like, what they really need to do, if they really want to get a good deal, is like, pick the area, pick the market, pick the kind of company that you want. Like some people might want a franchise, or I would never want one, but I mean, they might want one, or they might want a welding shops, or they might want
Mhm.
like car washes, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like, and then go and knock on the doors of all the owners in that whole city, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
Austin or Dallas or Florida or Toronto, or doesn't matter, and talk to every owner and say, "Hey, you want to sell your company?" And they're like, well, today I do. I don't want this damn thing, and blah blah blah. My kids are pain in the ass, and blah blah blah. What are you offering, right? And you're like, oh, okay. So then you can start talking, and that's how most people like get the good deals. Is same thing with buying houses on the pre-market, right? They knock on
Yeah.
doors, and and that's the best way is to pick the market, pick the kind of company. Maybe it's a bakeries, right? Every bakery in Orlando, you for sale, you want to sell your business? Yes, no.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, the owners will be 80 years old, nobody to sell it to. And these businesses often just close and they go off into the sunset, and all that value just gets absorbed into the ether, and never, no one
Yeah.
gets a reward.
No one
Happens
ever
all the time.
realizes the reward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company. That's amazing. No, very smart too, because sometimes I bet they don't even think about selling it. Like it doesn't even
Yeah.
occur to them that
No,
like we
right.
could sell. We'll just close the doors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a
Yeah.
great point. I love that too, that it's almost like you started something new, but you still really stayed in your lane. So it's like when you
Yes.
stepped in, it wasn't overcomplicated, over confusing. Like you're like, I know what to do, I know
Right.
how to do it, I know how to keep this growing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't feel that part doesn't stress me out at all, right? I'm a little stressed out by new technology, new customers I don't know, but in time that becomes more familiar. But going from, wholesale electronic distributor to like a SaaS, I don't know anything about SaaS and customer acquisition costs, and like it's just not a jump I can make at my age, and it's too many variables, and you know, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. And I think if I remember correctly, this time you don't have partners, but you've had partners in
Right.
the past, right?
Yeah,
So
so yeah.
what was
So
that
I had 3
decision?
partners on my
Yeah.
first business. I had 2 partners on my second, me and another guy on my second company, and no partners in this business, right? And so it's, you know, it's important because, and partners can be great, especially like there's a lot of positives to it or whatever. But I mean, sometimes in hindsight, you want to, you can see clearly some of the negatives. And it's not so much a negative thing. It's just that, when you get a big number and there's 3 of you, you have to divide it by 3, right? And and so it makes a huge difference, right? And then you get a number and you got to divide it by 2 or whatever. And then you have to divide up, well, over those 15 years, like, was it a 50-50 split, right? And
Yeah.
oftentimes it's not, but you never really come up with the money to buy them out earlier on, and you never think about a big payday. And they're sure they get a big check every year, but your checks is bigger. You never really think of it, and one thing leads to another, and then someone wants to offer you 10 million, you got to give 5 million to a guy who never comes to work anymore, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not
It's
saying that my
difficult.
partner, that wasn't my experience, but I mean, I'm just being dramatic about it. And
Yeah.
so I thought, if I'm going to do it the third time, 2 reasons: one, I didn't want to divide it by 2 or 3, and two, I wanted to see if I could do it on my own, because I did it with multiple people before because of the fear of not being good enough, right? And so I was
Yeah.
testing my own resilience.
That's fun.
Yeah,
I like that. And what would you say are some of the challenges outside of like the testing on resilience? Like it sounds like you're getting to face that part of yourself by going solo, but are there
yeah.
other trade-offs that occurred that you're starting to realize from going solo?
Yeah, so one of them is kind of like, these are kind of hard to put into words, but like, I guess succinctly as possible, is like, like, let's say you have an idea, like, oh, I want to go in this new market, or like take on this new product line, and and you want your partner from your last company who had a 50% stake in it, and waiting in the risks and the rewards, to weigh in and help you to come up with it. And, whereas it's hard to ask just staff members and employees, right? And even if they give you an answer, it's often curated with a, what's the answer I need to give you so that you'll stop talking and I can go and do things that I care about, because you're already, you're making all this money, and and I don't care what you do. You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
and again, I'm exaggerating for effect, but it's very true, right? And so you don't have anyone to, you don't have anyone closely that's really got any skin in the game that can really help
Mhm.
you, and you might have friends, mentors, and cohort groups that you're in, like, see, young entrepreneurs or tech, or there's all these groups you can join, and those are very helpful. And I've been in them over time. And but and that's probably the closest you're going to get as a solopreneur or whatever. But yeah, like, that's one of the things, is you don't have anyone sharing the risk. And then if there's like a financial challenge, you're the only one that's called upon for cash calls or things like that, right? And
Yeah.
that's another thing. And yeah, I don't exactly remember what your question was, but
You
I mean,
answered it. It was basically
okay.
like, what are
Yeah.
the trade-offs? What are the big
Oh yeah.
challenges of running solo?
Right.
You totally answered
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And when you bought Prague USA, what would you say are some of the things that you shifted within the company? I know you mentioned the branding shifted. Is there anything else that when you came in, you looked at it and you're like, I'm going to shift this, transform this?
Yeah. I pretty much changed everything. And like, I put in a state-of-the-art ERP system, right? And about in 2 years, I've owned it for 2 years, but I only worked here for a year because I was finishing up on my other company. But in those 2 years, I mean, 60-70% of the employees have cycled through. And it's kind of like a change management thing. It's not like I fired them or anything. It's not like that. It's just a couple of them left right away. And then a couple of
Mhm,
them got annoyed because they don't like the color of the new logo. And over time, you have to expect 100% turnover, right? Over X amount of
mhm.
time. I don't know the math, but it's, 100% over X amount of time, everyone will leave, right? They're going
Yeah.
to go, right? So you got to be prepared for that, especially even and specifically the owner. You probably might only get them for 6 months or a year, so get it all ASAP out of them that you need, right? And uh yeah, I keep forgetting your questions that you're asking, and I go rambling on these thoughts, and then
No,
I'm
you're
not sure if
perfect.
I.
Because just talking about like what you had shifted and what you had changed when you came
Oh,
into the
everything. Yeah. So I did.
organization.
Yeah. The color. Yeah. The
Yeah.
branding. We added. We only had 5 partners, vendor partners when I started. I doubled it. Got 10 vendor partners.
Mhm,
Um, brought in new. I A big fan of the EOS operating system.
mhm,
EOS. Now, I didn't put EOS in here because I feel we're a little bit pre EOS in terms of the the number of people required in the business to
mhm.
really. But I'm using all the EOS concepts of structure first, people second, right person, right seat, and all those kinds of things. And so I've done all that. Um, yeah, they had a lot of remote working, and I'm not a fan of remote work. And so
Mhm.
I kind of like improved the office and the environment. I created it as more of a destination to come, and the new people that I've hired, I put out the jobs as, you know 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in the office kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Now, of course, the sales guys are remote because they're all over the US and they work from home. But I mean, the admin and stuff, I'm not, I just not a fan of the whole, like, oh, I got to work at home 3 days a week. And I know a lot of people do, but maybe their job's right for it. But this kind
Yeah.
of business, it's good that we're all together, and and we can go over and talk to each other about the issues in real time, right? So change that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, plus you are so have like an actual office, so there's no reason
Yes.
to like pay for an
Right.
office and not have people there.
Yeah. Right.
When you're
Not
the
have
only
people
one
over.
showing
Yeah.
up, you're like, what am I
Right.
doing? Yeah. I
Yeah.
do agree with that though. I think the remote work is an interesting thing. I get it does work in some industries, but yeah, back in the day, I
Yeah.
went from regular to remote at one point, and it wasn't COVID or anything. It was like decades
Yeah.
ago. It just was because I moved. And so
Yeah.
they didn't want to let me go. They let me do remote, and it was different. It was hard
Yeah.
even as an employee because I was just so used to walking into the office next door and asking a quick question or someone asking me a quick question
Hmm.
and things getting resolved really quickly. Um, and it was actually hard. I was on a different time zone. It was difficult. I was in a different
Yeah.
country. It was hard. Yeah. And when I
Yeah.
came back, it just felt like smooth. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. And so why choose ERP as one of your first moves? What did it like
So
fix really quickly?
yeah, because I'm just kind of like very geeky about ERP, and I know the value of it. And so I did numerous ERP implementations at the first company in the 1991 company. We put in two different systems, and then we put in SAP, and we were just using sort of a hodgepodge system at GapWires in the beginning. Then we moved to SAP, and then we absorbed some companies and stuff and put all them on SAP as well. So I did like 3 or 4 implementations of SAP, and by doing that and whatever, and just my natural, the way I think about the business and whatever, I'm always thinking about the ways of automating it inside the ERP and connecting this to this, to that, to this. And it's just like, I just didn't want a bunch of separate systems. Like, oh, we're using like HubSpot for this and we're using QuickBooks for that. And we're using, I'm like, okay, well, do they talk? No, we don't bother with any of that. I'm like, oh, the customers are in one list and the accounting data is in another. And I just wanted it to all be in one, because I knew coming from Canada that I couldn't always be here. So I wanted to know that I could log into a portal for my ERP system anywhere on the planet and have a secure access on my phone, on my laptop, whatever, at work, and log into a system that had everything, right? The funnel, the marketing, the website, everything. It's all inside of a combined ERP system, and for small business, and it works great, right? And so, but I mean, I have a natural affinity for it. Other people might have done it a different way, but I mean, I can't think of doing it any other way, right? So,
Yeah. And would you say, like, as you implemented it, was that part of the challenge that the older employees had, was having kind of a new system like this? Yeah.
oh
So
yeah,
you lost a few.
oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I have people right up until recently that for 2 years have been
Yeah.
running a dual system, right? Where either they were not, and even they weren't 100% inside the ERP, but they were running it 100% on like Excel, Word, and offline systems for dealing with the customers and whatever, and then having to retype it all into our system in order to get the work process, because it won't work without it. So they
Yeah.
can't, but they wouldn't just rip the band-aid off. And I'm like,
And stop with the Excel.
yeah. And I'm like, you give me any problem and I'll show you that I can solve it. And if not, I'll pay the programmers to fix it in the ERP.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you're doing that I can't do better in Odoo. We use Odoo, and you know, and so, but they just went, no, my customers prefer to get it in Word, right? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay,
You're like, they'll get used to it. They'll like it.
yeah. And so, yeah, so and eventually through attrition, or other change management, you get past that, and the new people that come in, they use it as a natural matter of course, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, change. So the other thing about any kind of change is like what I learned over time, and trying to say it the most succinctly, is it doesn't matter what change you do, you will piss off somebody. And
Yep.
even if you're giving them a raise, they'll probably still be mad, right? And so there's like literally nothing that you can change, including giving them a promotion and a raise, that won't make them mad,
Yeah.
right? Because it's the human nature. I don't know, like, just again, I love to say, hear me now, believe me later, right? Doesn't matter. When you change something, they'll be mad.
Yeah. They get
And
pissed off.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so there's an adjustment time, and even if it's better, oh, but such as, oh, and it's this and it's that and whatever, and they have this bad feeling, right? And so change is very, 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 very difficult to manage, and
Yeah.
so you just have to resign yourself that people will be mad, and just meet them where they're at, and try to move on. You're not going to be able to not have them get mad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not having those unrealistic expectations,
yeah,
like you're about to piss people off. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fair. And were there any roles that you added when you came into the business? Like, were any gaps that you immediately saw, like, I want to add this person, this department?
Yeah, it was, yeah, because like the sales guys were mainly the jack of all trades. They did all their own quoting. They did all their own. They're very independent minded. Whereas
Mhm.
now I have business development representatives that generate leads. They're in the Philippines, and they're phoning customers and emailing and texting and whatever. And those leads then go to my inside sales team, which call them and warm them up a bit more. then, you know, and so I've added like inside sales, I've added business development, I've added more structure in the accounting side.
Mhm.
I've added a higher level CFO, um, who's fractional and not a full-time employee, but nonetheless on the payroll monthly and does a specific number of hours, right? And I just recently added a CTO, mainly for IT security and cyber threats and things like that, because there's a lot of like nonsense going on with fake orders, fake checks, stolen money,
Mm.
oh, it's just a constant nightmare dealing with the shenanigans of that stuff. So I hired again, and so in this thing, I'm really what I'm learning about, and I can tell you later, looking back, is like I'm doing everything fractional and
Mhm.
as possible. So fractional CFO, fractional CTO, and just seeing, I'll give you 10 hours a month. The marketing guy is 20 hours a month, fractional marketing support, right?
Mhm.
And so none of those existed before. So
Okay. Okay, that's
yeah.
cool. So it's basically you're bringing people on that you would love to have, but not full-time quite yet.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm actually deliberately don't think they might need to be full time much later, but I
Later.
want a guy who's expensive and as capable as a CFO, but
Yeah.
I only want to pay him for like 4 hours a month, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all I need and that's all I want to pay for, right? And
Yeah, but you
rather than
still
just
want that quality.
most people would just forgo him, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm learning about, wow, this is a great concept. You can actually have a CFO and get a very limited number of hours, and they only do CFO stuff. And you only pay, and yeah, the hourly rate's very high, but you're only paying them for a fraction. And so it's very interesting learning that, hey, you can fractionalize a lot of the business can be fractionalized, right?
Yeah, you get really top quality people for the
Yeah.
time that you
Yeah.
actually need them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I like top quality people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Uh,
So,
and so before we close out, I actually would really love to know a little bit more about the DJ dynamic, right? So
okay.
how
Yeah.
did you get into that?
So when I was 17, I lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and it was 1979. Honestly, it was. And I was born in 62. And so I was driving up this main drag in Niagara Falls, and it was in the middle of the roller rink mania of the late 70s, where every town in North America pretty much was getting a roller rink, right? And several other towns had gotten roller rinks and rollers. Everyone was going roller skating, and I realized that the star at all these roller rinks was the DJs, right? So I was driving up the street and I saw this rink being made, and so I pulled in and I went in and I said, "Oh, is the owner here?" And he's like, "I'm the owner." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well, it seems like you're opening soon. I assumed you wanted to hire the best DJ in town. So when do I start?" Right. And that's literally what I said to him. And he said, "Well, how about in 3 weeks?" And I said, "Okay." And so I left and I realized I had 3 weeks to learn how to DJ because I'd never done it before and I'd never DJed in my life. Right. I just wanted to be the DJ. And so the guy hired me and I worked at this roller rink DJing, and I've literally like been a DJ ever since. And like, there's been some time
Yeah.
when I wasn't doing it. And I mean, but I've worked in many, many places. And then over the years, in the last number of years, I did some events for some charities, and I do it all obviously at a very preferred rate, where I discount my fees, but I just cover equipment costs, insurance, transportation, and, things like that. And so now I get enough gigs per year that I'm happy. And, these charities are happy with the fees, and I get to, and I like doing like bigger, they're not 10,000 people, but I can do events up to like 1,200 people, which is quite
Mhm.
exciting and fun, and get it out of my system. And, and it's enough. Like, I don't have to be doing it every weekend, right? There was a time where I was doing weddings and all that kind of stuff, but the bridezillas and all that scared me off. And so
Fair.
now I only do events. I typically only do it for charities. And, yeah, and so, yeah, it all started with this, job I didn't deserve and someone who gave me a chance that I didn't deserve, and I had to prove it from that point on, just like I said with, being an entrepreneur, right? And,
Yeah.
yeah, and my son, and when he was doing a warehouse job and, he knew it was coming in and he wanted to get into sales and he thought he might want to do car sales or whatever, right, wrong, or indifferent. That was his choice. And I said, okay, just pick the, where do you want to do it? And he said, oh, this town in Ontario in Canada. Right. And he's like, I said, okay, just drive into every dealer and, walk in, ask to speak to the sales manager. And when he walks up, just say, here, I'm ready to sell some cars for you. Right. And, he went to 10 companies the first day and he got 6 job offers. Right. And,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so he didn't last very long in the car business, but he's in sales now selling high-tech electronics, security stuff. But
Yeah.
but nonetheless, that methodology works really well. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I use that sort of like method a lot and it works. It often works. So
Yeah. I love that. I love that. That's
yeah.
very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for
Yeah.
your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I feel like we have so many nuggets. And yeah, I would love for you to share with the audience where they can find you.
So best place is on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. And yeah, so they can just connect with me there and ask me whatever they want or engage in any kind of question, comment, or dialogue. And they
Yeah.
can connect with me on my website and all that too. But the best way is just to go to LinkedIn and look for my name, and yeah, they'll find me quite there, and I'm there all the time. So
Perfect. And I'll put the links
yeah,
in the show notes too. And I also have a link for your book, so we'll pop that in the show
nice.
notes
Thank
as
you.
well.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
And yeah, thank you again for coming. If you
Yeah,
guys really enjoyed this, if you liked it, feel free to share it with those that you think would really benefit from the information. And again, thank you, Glenn. This one was
yeah,
a really fun one.
yeah. All right. Thanks, Carly.